Hey everyone, welcome back to Rooted in Blooms. I know it's been a hot minute since the last video update. It's just been a slower part of the season. Fall is officially here. Summer garden is pretty much officially done. And I thought, what better time than to do something like a post-mortem of how did this season go? There were a lot of lessons learned this year. There were a lot of different weather patterns that we had to deal with this year. And so I thought I would go ahead and discuss in detail some of the varieties that I grew, the pros and the cons of them, whether or not I'll be moving forward with growing them again in the future. So starting with the brassicas that I planted this year, I did broccoli and cauliflower, cabbages, I did some broccolini and some kale. Now the cabbages that I grew this year were the Caraflex and the Red Acre. Both of these did really well for me. I did plant them in a new space this year. I am attempting to grow them again in the fall. Unfortunately, the squirrels got to them even after the plants got established. They kept getting dug up. So definitely a pain point that I'm gonna need to think about next year. How can I protect my brassicas from the squirrels? Because I've definitely caught them digging them up and chewing on the leaves. So, but overall, I'm very happy with these two cabbage varieties. I do have an older packet of cabbage, Brunswick, but I think I'm gonna just move forward with these in the future. They both were fairly compact. Like I said, I had really good success with them, except for the squirrels. Now, this was also my first year doing the broccoli rabe, so I did plant the rapini variety in the spring and again in the fall. The spring, these did well. First time ever growing this, so still kind of learning about the variety, when to harvest and all of that, but overall very, very quick to grow, and it was minimally touched by pests and all of that. The varieties cauliflower and broccoli that I attempted to grow this year were all failures. Mostly because of the squirrels. That's gonna be a common theme this year, is the squirrels. They dug up my plants immediately. I've since started using the little critter cages that you'll see in some of my other videos. All they are mesh trash cans purchased at a dollar store. So if you find that you're having problems with squirrels or other maybe animals digging into your garden, highly recommend picking up these trash cans. You can buy them on Amazon specifically as like critter protecting cages, but they're really expensive. So my suggestion is go to your local dollar store and see if you can find them for $1 or $2 there. And then you can purchase some of the landscape staples separately and just do that to pin them down. So with the addition of those, it's helped a lot with some of my other seedlings that I had done, but it was a little too late in spring. And then I do have some broccoli out there and some cauliflower for the fall. We'll see. Again, the weather's it's doing its own thing right now, so I'm hoping that those will come in and I'll be able to harvest those in a few weeks. But I did the purple of Sicily cauliflower and the Waltham 29 broccoli. I did purchase another type of broccoli that did not get it planted in the spring, but it's the Bell Star, and this is supposed to be slow bolt. So looking forward to trying this again next spring and summer to see if I can have some success with this. And I had great success with kale. I've never really had any issues with kale. The cabbage moths will come in during different times of the season, and I do have to be mindful of the little caterpillars that you'll find on them. Just pick them off or spray them with the BT spray. But the varieties that I had done this year were the Russian Ragged Jack, Russian Red Ragged Jack. I like this variety, it does well. The Nero Toscana, which is also known as dinosaur kale, also another solid. And then just a scarlet kale. All three of these, like I said, no real issues. They all grow in well. My variety favorite, if I had to pick just one, is the scarlet. So I'm going to keep that in mind moving forward. I had planted out way too much kale. So also being mindful of how much of a particular crop I plant out, and then maybe favoring my favorite variety next year is my takeaway from this season. This year, the squash was just a headache and just a big fat failure. The weather we had this year was just incredibly rainy. It made, for whatever reason, things difficult when it came to the pollination of the squash. They would flower and then they just weren't getting pollinated, or the flowers weren't producing both male and female flowers. So I had big squash plants with no fruit on them whatsoever. What's ironic is that I had done some late planting of zucchini and actually got some zucchini, I think it was back in September. So that might be something to just for myself to be mindful of moving forward in the next year's growing season, is doing more of a late planting. The squash bugs seemed like they weren't as aggressive. The vine borer were pretty much gone, so I had a lot of success with a late planting of squash. The only thing I was running into is now that my temperatures have been cooling off, there's a lot of mildew, powdery mildew on the leaves, which, at this point, I still have some zucchini plants out in the garden, but they're not getting as much daylight because the days are getting shorter and they're getting just more diseased. So again, more information and data for me to sift through and think through for next year. But the varieties that I planted this year, just again, so I can kind of catalog my experiences with these varieties, were I did attempt to grow some scallop blend squash. Did not have any success with these. Again, it could have been the pots I was trying to grow these in. It could have been the vine borer pressure, the squash bug pressure. In any case, didn't have any success. Still have seeds for next year. Willing to try again. I would love having scallop squash around. I had a couple varieties of pumpkin seeds that I planted that did decent. They were the pumpkin sugar pie and then this winter luxury pie. Both of these are smaller pumpkin varieties. I was able to harvest a handful of them. A couple of them had been spoiled by vine borer though. I wasn't expecting to find the actual pest in the squash, but they had bored into the actual squash and then it rotted out. So unfortunately, again, thinking through what are ways that I can better protect these organically as much as possible. Issues I had in the garden, the squash bugs, they're gonna be there, they're annoying, but they're easy to find, kill, pick off. The vine borer, it was tedious trying to catch the boreholes, and then I tried to do the little surgery where you slice open the vine and pull the grubs out and then spray it down with BT. But more often than not, it was too late by the time I did that. So yeah, vine borer resistant varieties I think is what I'm going to be looking at doing next year if possible. So if you have any suggestions on other varieties that do well with the vine borer, leave a comment down below. And then like I said, I did some zucchini, I did some yellow squash. They just weren't super successful, weren't super prolific. I wish I could be that person who is just swimming in squash every summer. I love squash, and it just hasn't been the case the last couple of years. But I did, my varieties that I did plant were the Ford Hook zucchini. So I do still have some seeds from that for this variety. I'll continue to plant them out until I'm out of them. I did this new variety, the round zucchini, this year. I really liked this variety. It was a really pretty variety. It had variegated leaves. The fruit itself is, kind of I'd say grapefruit size, round, it's variegated. And so I did have a little bit of success with this. Again, I was growing it in pots, and I'm wondering if maybe if I had stayed on top of fertilizing, things would have done a little bit better in my pots. So next year, I'm eager to try this, maybe planting it out in a different space in the garden. And then my yellow squash was the early prolific straight neck, which I had one plant that started producing okay in the late summer. Again, it was a late summer planting. So just keeping in mind, zucchini seems to do better for me in the later summer. Unfortunately, bigger squash plants like pumpkins, I didn't even attempt spaghetti squash because they take more days of maturity. I also did a butternut squash variety. I don't remember the exact variety. They were some seeds I got from our local library. That was my most productive squash. They seem to do really well with pests. Vine borer left them alone. I was able to pick off a few fruits and get them processed. This year was absolute failure when it came to peas. I only have the one variety right now. It's the Golden Sweet. Now I've grown these in the years past and they did pretty well. So this is an older pack of seeds. These are from 2023. As far as I know, they should still be good, but my problems were I was sowing these directly, and I'm wondering next year, especially if I'm gonna try this variety in this particular seed packet again, if I shouldn't go ahead and start them inside in some 6 cells, just so that I can monitor them a little bit closer, make sure they don't dry out, because I just had very, very low germination. I think I had one plant in the early spring, tried to do a late summer planting and nothing came up. Again, maybe the soil dried out on me. They are in a space that wasn't on drip irrigation. So keeping that in mind, I'm probably gonna go ahead and try this variety again, looking at other varieties as well, and starting these indoors before planting them out. So the melons, again, once again, I feel like every year I've been striking out on planting melons. I do not know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know if it's a fertilization issue. I don't know if it's a timing issue, if it's a pest issue. I've been trying to plant 2 different varieties for the last 2 years. This melon Petit Gris de Rene. I will chronically mispronounce this in all of my videos because I can never remember this name. This is a very old packet of seeds. It's 2021. I start them indoors, they germinate, I plant them out, and they just never produce anything. I mean, it's like nothing. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong with these. So I may just throw in the towel altogether on this variety, but we'll see. I've been trying to also plant the Minnesota midget cantaloupe with 0 success. So all of you melon growers out there, is there a foolproof variety that I can grow? I'm not looking for anything that sprawls too much, something a little bit more compact, nothing too big. That's why I was, attracted to these kind of smaller varieties. But again, no success, 0 success. They were in the garden beds for a long time and then they just pooped out on me. So very disappointing year once again for the melons. Late summer, I planted out my okra, which I had planted after I harvested my garlic. Okra does great. I have not had any issues with the okra I've been growing. I do the Clemson spineless okra. We'll continue to plant this variety. Great little crop for me this year. So cucumbers. I learned a few things about cucumbers this year. One, the last couple of years I've been growing my cucumbers on the side of my house. I have this kind of pseudo raised garden bed. I have attempted to plant too many plants of cucumber on the trellis that I have created, which is not large enough. So cucumber, I realized one, it would probably benefit from being pruned. I didn't prune it at all, so it eventually turned into this beast. 2, I need to not plant as many plants. I always overplant. I think I overcrowd with the thought that I am just anticipating disease or pest issues. And so I think I need to maybe be a little bit more prudent with my planting of all my plants, but in particular the cucumber. I also realized that my husband and I just do not eat a lot of cucumber. We will snack on it. We don't do any kind of pickling with it as of right now. I'm not the biggest fan of pickles. I feel like I just lost half my audience saying that, but I am just not a really big pickle fan, and so I don't mind eating cucumber fresh, snacking on it. And I realized I was just planting way too much for us to keep up with the amount that we were getting. So the varieties though that I did plant, and I mentioned this in my garden tour videos, but the cucumber Space Master 80, very pleased with this variety. It's just a solid all-around good cucumber. It's got a smaller footprint in terms of vining, and it was just incredibly productive. So I think instead of having, I think we had 2, I probably could have gotten away with just 1 of these plants and been content all summer. The other variety that I grew is this cucumber lemon cuke. I like this variety okay. It's actually a really good snacking cucumber, but I think I just need to be intentional with how many I plant, because I had accidentally planted 3 or 4 of these, and we were just, again, drowning in cucumbers. So note to future self, don't plant as many cucumbers. I also, not cucumber related, but also kind of gourd related and squash related, I had gotten a loofah, and so this was my first year growing loofah. I have seen other gardeners grow loofah, and the whole concept seems super interesting to me, that you can have this product at the end that you know is actually usable in the house. This was not successful for me either. I had 1 loofah plant, maybe that was part of my problem, but I literally only got 1 loofah to grow. It flowered, it vined, 1 loofah. I don't know if this was, again, maybe a weather issue, or maybe I need more than 1 loofah plant to help with the pollination. Leave a comment down below if that's the case. But it was just kind of, it was a failure. And so real disappointed in that. It's still out there on my arch trellis, just drying. It's like deformed and misshapen. I don't even know if I can use it. So a bit of a bummer with this. The other thing I was gonna mention, I made the mistake probably of growing this in a grow bag, setting it aside to trellis up. I was not fertilizing as much as I should, and I'm wondering if soil quality could have also been the downfall of the loofah. So I'm willing to try this again though. I am willing to give it a go, see if I have a better year next year. But do leave a comment down below if you know that this is a type of crop that requires more than 1 for good production. Okay, bush beans. This year was a fantastic year for bush beans. So I know I've been going through some plants that have not done well, but my bush beans were like, they did great. Okay, so I did, at the beginning of the year, I planted out some of the dragon tongue bush beans. I love this variety. This is one of the more popular varieties of Baker Creek for a reason. They're just a lot of fun to grow if you've never done this variety. They're easy to spot in the garden because they are variegated, they're purple, they're flat, they have a lovely flavor. They just, solid bean, in my book. Contender bush beans. It was from Botanical Interest, is Contender bush beans. Another super solid bush bean. No issues there, you know, they produced well, they petered out, of course, you know, they had their life cycle. And then I did a later planting with the trio, again, sold at Botanical Interest. They have like a trio packet of the bush beans, and it's got like green, yellow, and purple bush beans, which my puppy took the packet and chewed up and spread them all over the yard. So I was able to pick up the majority of the beans and now just have them literally just in a bag, not knowing what's what. But in any case, they did well for me. They're still in my garden, and again, the cooler weather, they're slowing down, and I think they're pretty much done at this point. The other type of bean that I did were some long beans. Not entirely sure of the variety. They are just I think they're a Chinese long bean variety. They're green. I do have a variety that's purple that I didn't plant this year, but the green ones I did this year, and they did really well. They do really, really nice on an arch trellis since they are a pole bean variety. But overall, like I said, green beans did great, and hopefully, planting the same varieties next year, I will continue to have another good year with the beans. So I did a lot of firsts this year, and one of them was planting onions. The other one was doing leeks again. So this year I planted the King Richard leek. I probably could have done a better job of blanching. That's where you kind of bury it deep so that its stem part is white. So that's when you're cooking with a leek, that's the part that you usually cook with most. So I could have done a little bit better job at planting them out after I started them indoors, because the ones that I have harvested so far are, the white part wasn't great. But again, it was fun having that, as a crop I grew in the garden. And I actually still have a few out there that I need to pull. And I've been able to process and freeze for soups for the winter. So I'll continue to grow leek in the future. The green onions, I did the Tokyo Long White. It's just a bunching onion. Super successful. Again, I still got it out in the garden from the spring. At this point, they're massive. I just need to pull them. They're almost too big to really chop up finely, but easy crop, no problems there. This year I did, for the first time, 2 different bulbing onions. So just kind of playing around with how that whole process worked. I did a yellow Granix, PRR, so it's a yellow onion, and then a red Amposta onion. I still have seeds that I intend to plant these again next year. If you go back to the video where I'm harvesting my onions, you'll see they weren't very big. They weren't super productive for me. And I know there was a lot of learning curve to it. So my guess is, again, going back to soil life, I'm wondering, if I bumped up the fertilization for them, if things would have been done differently, if they would have been better. I had a puppy who's still very puppy right now. Juniper was climbing in and out of my garden beds too at the time when they were growing. So I think next year I'm anticipating protecting them, maybe putting a barrier around them. I've seen other gardeners with success of doing wind barriers and just helping kind of promote that growth for them to bulb up and get bigger. So we'll be doing those 2 varieties again next year though. Tomatoes this year, oh man, what a heartbreak. Tomatoes this year were just one of the biggest disappointments I had, next to the squash. But tomatoes usually are somewhat foolproof for the summer, but we had so much rain. Weathers just weren't as warm, as quickly as they should have been, and things got stunted, things got diseased, it just wasn't good. So early spring, early summer, I had a little bit of success with some of the cherry putting on. And then by the time that my big tomatoes were starting to put on fruit, that's when the squirrels came in. So we had a delay with the weather, and then we had these squirrels that were just ravenous. I mean, I tried everything. If you go back and watch my videos, I mentioned too, I did the little bags, mesh bags around the fruit, hoping to keep them from getting to them. They just chewed through them. I tried some pinwheels in the hopes of movement, maybe deterring them. Didn't do anything. I mean, really the best thing was sending my dogs out there, but they couldn't be out there all day. And so they destroyed my crop. So the first wave of tomatoes were pretty much obsolete for me. Now, once the weather cooled off a little bit, so August, September, and the native trees were dropping things like walnuts and acorns and whatever other things squirrels eat, they turned their attention to rummaging for those things. So they actually pretty much left my tomatoes alone, which was, thank goodness, which is great, because I did get a second wave of tomatoes. In fact, kind of grateful that our October has been as warm as it is, because I have the last 2 weeks harvested just a ton of tomatoes, which is very strange to say, harvesting a bunch of tomatoes in October, but here we are. And so I am glad that I was able to at least get some kind of production from my plants, giving me the opportunity to try some of the varieties out that were brand new to me. So that's another thing with my tomatoes. You know, I only have so much of a footprint to grow, and I can't help, there's just so many different varieties of tomatoes, and they all sound so cool. And so I'm trying to try out different varieties, see, do I want to try this one again? And it was getting disappointing where I was unable to really truly try these varieties as they were, because they were getting demolished by squirrels. But like I said, have had some success with them and been able to make things like salsa and sauces and all of that. So, but the varieties I grew this year were the Bush Roma Supremo. This is a determinate tomato, so it only got to be about 3.5 feet tall. So these are perfect for my big pots. These highly productive. Really lovely tomato, definitely gonna grow again. Definitely a favorite for the squirrels as well, so just keeping a mental note of that, but very happy with this variety. Then I did grow some patio choice yellow on our back deck. You know, it's nice to have maybe a couple cherry tomatoes on the deck, but I'm already deciding that I'm gonna narrow it down to a different cherry tomato variety. And use my pots for something different. So I will not be growing this again next year, but overall it's not a bad variety if you want to give it a shot. It's, you know, mild in flavor. It's also a little bit of an early producer, so that was one success we had kind of in early spring before the squirrels came and the weather came and demolished everything. The cherry tomato that I would like to definitely like focus on next year is the Sun Gold. So these, when the squirrels are leaving them alone, are highly productive. Next year I would like to kind of like hedge all my bets on this one, so to speak. Attempted to grow this Brad's Atomic Grape. This is a free packet I got again. Grew it because I had it, looked like fun. I can't tell when they're ripe and when they're not. I know that sounds stupid, but we picked some that had green and some purple, and they didn't taste very good. And so I don't think I'm gonna be trying this one again. Not very productive, barely any clusters on the 2 plants I planted. Again, it could just be this year's weather patterns, but just not pleased or impressed with this variety at all. A variety that I would have loved to have grown, but we had zero success in germinating, was the Castelletto. We'll be trying this again. Had zero germination with these seeds. I think I have a little bit left, so maybe next year we'll get lucky. But my big slicer tomato this year was the Brandywine. And the problem with this, we love a good Brandywine, but the problem with it was going back again to the weather and to the squirrels. So I think there was one point in one of my videos, I even like pointed out how excited I was that there was some like green fruit like growing, and it wasn't, I think it wasn't even like 2 days later, all that fruit was gone. So again, the squirrels just kind of came and took them out. The problem with these really big slicers is they just take so long to ripen on the vine. And when I was having the squirrel issues, there was nothing I could really do. So willing to do this again, this variety again, but if next year I'm finding that the big slicers are just getting taken and there's nothing I can do about it, then I may need to turn towards like the Romas or something else, because like I said, this takes a long time to ripen on the vine, and that's why I think we only picked one this last month. And there's some green ones out there, which I'll gather before the end of the season to, you know, make fried green tomatoes or something. But the other Roma that I was able to grow was a striped Roma. This is a indeterminate, so it's vining. It'll continue to grow up whatever trellis you put it on, and these turned out to be surprisingly very productive as well as the Supremos. So very happy with this. You know, once the squirrels laid off of them, I was able to pick a lot in this last kind of month. So I will go ahead and plant these out again as well. Talk a little bit about peppers this year. So we did have a really good pepper year, and maybe, you know, who knows if it was the weather, if it was just Great year for peppers. The peppers I grew this year were ones that ones that I had grown before, and then a couple new ones. But the poblano pepper, which, you know, great little spicy pepper, kind of a versatile, not super hot. I have noticed that my poblanos don't seem to get as large as I would think they should. I don't know if it's this particular variety, just say 3 to 6 inch. And I wonder too, going back to fertilization, these were grown in pots and they just didn't, you know, they weren't great. I think 3 inches was as big as I was picking them. So I think I might, if I grow this again, I'm gonna be mindful of where I plant it. The sweet banana peppers, highly prolific, super prolific. Will grow again. Didn't have any issues with them, just loaded with fruit. The orange bell pepper, you know, when you grow bell pepper, the problem with the bell pepper plants is they might put on 4 or 5 fruit, and then you either pick them as they're green or wait until they change colors. I have done both. And so you just have to have the space to devote to a bell pepper. I actually bought some more bell peppers for next year, so I am intending to grow this one again as well. I grew the chili Anaheim, specifically the New Mex Joe E. Parker variety. Super successful plant, really, really prolific. Very happy with this. These got really big. Some of them got really big. Been able to use them for things like green chilies and cooking. So I will plant this variety again. I did plant, I think, too many. Going back again, what was it we were talking about? Oh, the cucumbers. So some of these peppers, I think I can delegate instead of planting like 3 of each, like maybe just do like 1 or 2, especially if they're really, really prolific. The candy cane chocolate cherry, these were okay. These are really pretty. They grew in fine. They're, you know, not like highly productive, but they did well. They're, like I said, very pretty. Flavor wise, they weren't like offering me anything that was unique. I have just been using them in cooking, and so I, you know, will probably grow out what's left in the seed packet, but I don't know if I would buy this packet again. Shishitos are one of our favorites, highly productive, does well, will grow again. This year I did the Megatron jalapeno rather than a regular jalapeno. These get a lot bigger, so they're about 4 inches. Again, productive, great. We'll plant again. And I think that was it for peppers. Okay, and with the magic of editing and fast forwarding, it is now night. I wanted to finish this video today, but I ran out of time earlier, and now the cat wants to be in the shot. Let's continue our discussion about the different variety of plants that I planted. The next category are all the herbs that I grew, the ridiculous amount of basil. So I did grow a lot of basil this year unintentionally because it just did really well for me. Some of it reseeded as well. And I also just, again, didn't judge the amount that I actually need to plant in the garden. So one of the things I want to do next year is plant fewer basil plants. In fact, I really would like to move a lot of my herbs to my deck garden, which of course you can't see the deck now tonight, but I would like to move some of the smaller grow pots and my other pots and just kind of shift my garden spaces. So the idea is if I put my herbs on the deck, I might be more likely to use them. But the varieties I did grow this year, of course, your typical basil, Genovese, which is always classic. I would grow this again next year. I did the lettuce leaf this year for the first time. I really, really enjoyed the size of this. They were big leaves, they grew well, and it just had a very similar taste to the Genovese basil, so very versatile when it came to cooking. Tulsi basil, I had way too much Tulsi basil, and this reseeds itself so easily in the garden. I will typically make tea with it, and I just didn't make that much tea over the summer. So again, I don't need as many Tulsi basil plants as what I ended up with. Great for the pollinators though, so it wasn't like a complete waste, but we'll grow again next year. I also did just the lemon basil and the cinnamon basil. Again, both of these or good for cheese and or just, like aromatic leaves and salads. I will be planting these again for my next year garden. I'm planning on it. Along with all of my basil, I did plant out some mint. So I did just a common mint plant that was on my back deck, so that was nice. I was able to grab leaves throughout the day, maybe toss in my water, so I'll continue to do that. And this variety did well for me. Parsley, I love parsley, and that I have always had on my back deck. So I'll continue to have it there as well. Also planted just a common chives plant. I technically had two varieties. I have a garlic chives that overwinters. I've got two of them in the garden. Oregano, I did the true Greek, did well for me. Wish I had more of it, but again, we'll be planting that next year. And then same with dill, another plant that did well for me. This one might be more challenging to grow on a back deck. It does get really tall. And so we'll see if I could do this next year in some grow pots. Cilantro, I've got two different varieties. I did this year just a regular Moroccan, and then I did purchase a slow bolt. Did I notice a huge difference between the two? Not really. I think the slow bolt lasted a little bit longer, more so than this one, but it wasn't like a huge difference for me. And honestly, I think I've got a bunch of seeds that I've saved from previous cilantro. So I'm just gonna grow what I've got on hand, and then, like I said, I don't think there's a huge difference right now for me with the difference in cilantro. I did attempt to grow some spinach and arugula, Swiss chard. These I direct sowed into the ground, these three, and they just didn't germinate as well as I would have hoped. So next year I'm going to be starting them ahead of time and then planting them out. And then just also the spaces that I was trying to plant these in, I was having issues. So most of these I was attempting to grow in my side bed along the side of the house. Doesn't have drip irrigation set up in that space. It can be easier for me to neglect that space because it's outside our fenced yard, and a lot of times I don't think about it. So out of sight, out of mind. And so what I'd like to do is next year with these, put them in more of a prominent area where I'm thinking about them more so that I can have more of a successful harvest. The other one that I did this year that was planted in kind of the garden proper space was a bok choy, just purple lady. This did well for me. This is my first year. This was another free seed packet I acquired somewhere, some point. And so for bok choy, this is my first time growing it. I was really happy with it. So I assume I will continue planting this out next year, especially in the spring. Another brand new crop that I was attempting this year was corn. I was trying to find a balance of harvesting garlic and then what do I plant after that for the rest of the season. And I was attempting a short maturity variety of corn. It was this ambrosia corn here. Did not have any success with this. So I planted it out and the stalks came in, but they also got kind of toppled by some high winds, toppled by the puppy, and also where I planted the bulk of the corn, it just was not getting much sun. It was getting shaded out at the time by some cucumber plants on my arch trellis. And so I think definitely want to try this again next year, but I'm already visualizing where this needs to go in my garden to get more sunlight. Corn next year, just in a new spot. Okay, so one of the other really kind of new things I did was bring in more flowers. In years past, I'd only ever really done some cosmos, some zinnias, and maybe some marigolds. This year, I tried a whole variety of flowers. I got bit by the flower bug when I was looking through seed catalogs last year, and so I bought a whole bunch. I didn't even get around to growing all the seeds that I do have. That's one thing I want to get better at next year is actually planning and finding spaces for all of the flower seeds I've purchased. rather than just buying pretty seed packets and not doing anything with them. We did a number of things differently this year than last year. I tried a whole space for just flowers. I have some pros and cons of that experience. I attempted to grow chamomile again. This is like my second year trying to grow chamomile. For whatever reason, it's never come in great. And I'm not really sure why. I had it flower for me for a couple weeks and then it just kind of, I don't know, it kind of just disappeared. So I need to do a little bit more research into this. I would love to have chamomile in the garden because we do drink a lot of teas, and it would just be really cool to have my own chamomile tea that I could just make from the garden. Borage was another one that I attempted to grow. Again, the plants did okay, but they toppled over really easily. So I need to figure out the best way to, I think, support the plant while it grows and not let it get overshadowed by things like weeds. That was kind of my big issue this year with the flowers. Was in the space I planted, there was a lot of weeds that grew up that I just didn't get around to cleaning out. And so definitely thinking through what needs to be done next year to have a more successful flower garden. Sunflowers, the only variety I had this year was this Black Russian sunflower. It's an okay variety. My problem this year was, again, going back to squirrels. They tore out a lot of my sunflowers I started, so I only really ended up, I think, with one sunflower. And then it, you know, if you've ever grown sunflowers before, you know that they're beautiful and then they kind of die quickly. So the idea was to have a whole bunch, and that didn't happen. So next year, hoping to grow these guys again and then incorporate maybe some other varieties of sunflowers. I also purchased some French marigolds. I didn't start any this year. The ones that I did purchase, I have pulled and saved seeds. So my hope is next year to plant my own French marigolds, have those. Those do really well for me. I also have attempted to do nasturtiums. I lost my seed packet, which is why they're in here. Nasturtiums have always been hit or miss for me. New for me this year, though, was the bachelor buttons. So those were a lot of fun. Did not realize how tall and kind of wispy these guys would get. So keeping that in mind for next year when I plant more of those out. I also did some petunias. This was the Petite Charmer blend. When I purchased this, I was thinking I was getting more of a wave petunia that you would see in the hanging baskets, but this is more of a mounding variety. So knowing that, next year I'll be planting these in different places rather than in pots. They were kind of unwieldy in pots, but at the same time I really liked them. They're very whimsical and almost like cottage fairy style. So if that's your vibe, I recommend these. These are a lot of fun. So I'll be planting them again next year. And of course, you know, I did my cosmos. I didn't do as many cosmos or zinnias this year, and that's another thing that I'm disappointed in that I was trying all these brand new flowers, and then I kind of neglected the ones that I've had some success with in the past. So I do still have seeds from this year that I will hold on to for next year, as the candy stripe cosmos and kind of a pink seashell. So I will try those again. And then new for this year for me was the Orange Wonder Snapdragons. These guys, I feel like where I planted them among my other flowers got overshadowed. So I was expecting them to be a lot taller than they were. And so kind of keeping that in mind next year, I'm gonna arrange my flowers better. So it's all about the way I arranged it. I think things just kind of fell flat. The alyssum flowers, so I have done these for 2 years now. These are always great, but at the same time, they kind of get neglected when they're in my garden bed. So often I can get more obsessed about the vegetable plants and kind of ignore the flowers. And so I want to kind of pick up my flower game for next year. Other flowers I attempted to grow this year. This is it's taped over here, but this is a Chinese lantern flower. I had some success with germination, but I put them in some pots and they never actually produced flowers. And it does say late summer, so I am wondering if maybe I didn't hold out for them long enough, because I think by the time July was wrapping up, I just pulled them out of the pots because they weren't doing anything. So I will try these again next year and maybe be more patient and find the appropriate place to put them. Maybe they didn't do well in the pots that I had them in. Do a little bit of research. I didn't research this at all. I just kind of started the seeds and then threw them out in the garden. And of course, I did, some zinnias. These are just the California Giants blend. I had like minimal zinnias this year, which was kind of a bummer because they did well in the spot I put them, which was in a brand new spot. Now I've got a garden bed there, but they really did really nice. They were lovely against my fence line. And so I think next year I definitely want to do more, because I think I only had 2 or 3 zinnias, and this particular blend, you don't know what color you're getting. And I think I had like just 2 colors, which would have been nice to have more. So I would have had more of a variety. I did a calendula or pot marigold, and I had success with this. These were, easy flowers to grow. Again, I put them in places that were overshadowing other flowers, and so just being mindful of where I plant them. Otherwise, I enjoyed growing these, would grow them again. And then I did try this carnation blend, and they they were the ones that were tucked behind my calendula, and they didn't grow very tall and got overshadowed. So keeping that in mind, I would love to try these again too. I love carnations. Some root vegetables that I did this year that I kind of am taking some mental notes on. My radishes, I did my French breakfast radishes, which are seen here. I love these. This variety does really well for me. They're just easy to grow. So definitely a keeper. Definitely will be doing more. This year I attempted to grow the golden beets. So this was the Touchstone Gold. Because I've never grown beets before, didn't know what to expect. I think they did okay. I didn't have a ton. I picked a few. They were okay. I want to try them again. Again, going back to placement in the garden, and that's been going through my head a lot, especially as like I'm re-reviewing everything I grew. Is there a better place in the garden I could have grown things that would have made sense for space and for the actual crop? So we'll be trying again next year. Birds I grew this year was this Calliope blend and then this red cord Chantenay. Both of these did well for me. And then when it comes to lettuces, really any and all lettuces do pretty well for me. And I have a number of varieties that I have. If you purchase anything from Botanical Interest, they send you like the free packet. It's a mesclun lettuce. Mesclun. I don't know how to say that. It's just a cut and come again kind of variety of lettuce seeds. And honestly, that's really kind of the only way I grow my lettuce. So some people will let their lettuce mature all the way and then they'll harvest it. I have always just done the cut and come again method, where I'll let it kind of grow and then I'll cut the outer leaves and then let it grow and cut the outer leaves. So I'm really just okay with any kind of blended mix. With that said, I do have the little romaine, little gem. I've never waited till it forms like a full head. I always just get in there and cut it back. Same goes for the Butterhead Butter Crunch variety. And then I have this Lunix lettuce mix as well. So really any of the lettuces I've never been disappointed in. And so I will certainly just plant whatever I have in my stash here next year. And then whether or not I have a favorite lettuce, I haven't really determined that. They all do their job for me. Not shown because they weren't seeds was the garlic varieties I planted, as well as the potato varieties that I planted. So it was new for me again, was planting garlic, and I did a soft neck garlic variety. I wish I could remember the exact variety name. The soft neck did great for me. I thought it was great. I mean, it's my first year planting them, so I have no complaints there. The potatoes, I did potatoes for the first time this year, and I did a Yukon gem, which is just kind of a Yukon variety. I don't know what else to say. It was a Yukon variety. And one of the things, going back again to placement of where things were planted, is I had success, but then I feel like I would have had better successes if they were planted somewhere else. So one thing is I did plant them in my garden bed, making it very difficult for me to dig out. I don't think I let the plants die back as much as they should have, so I didn't get as many potatoes as I could have gotten, as large as potatoes as I could have gotten. I did not do a very good job of finding all the potatoes that could have been harvested. So next year, I have already planned to grow them in 15-gallon grow bags. I've got a set of 5 of them. So I will be doing probably a very similar variety. We just really, really enjoy Yukon potatoes, yellow potatoes in general. I'd also love to do sweet potato slips, but I'm a little on the fence on that because I'm not really sure where I'm going to be putting those. So I know my channel's been awfully quiet the last probably month and a half. Like I said, not a lot has been going on in the garden at the end of this kind of summer season. Been able to do some harvesting of things and, you know, watching the squirrels decimate my brassicas once again has been a little bit heartbreaking, but what can you do, I guess. But we do have some exciting things starting to happen now that the garden is pretty much done for the season, except for some of those brassicas. I will be ripping everything out and kind of resetting my beds. So I may be recording some of that content for you all soon. And then my garlic for next year is ready to be planted. So I do need to get that in the ground soon. I did get the opportunity to go to Baker's Creek Fall Festival. I am fortunate and I live about an hour away from their mother's store. So that was a lot of fun. I'll be sure to share some clips of it here in this video. One cool thing is they did give us their whole seed catalog for free. It's their 2025 catalog, but I can't imagine their 2026 being too different. It's nice because it's their whole catalog. It's not just like the free version that you can get online. This thing's like probably almost maybe a whole inch thick. Very big. I've already gone through it once, but I need to go through it maybe with a pen, circle my favorite things. But I also have to tell myself, don't buy any more seeds. We've got plenty of seeds as it is. But there are a few things in there that I definitely want to try out next year. Went to their seed store and all their seeds were discounted $2 a pack. So did buy some new seeds for next year. A few new varieties, not a lot. And then some of the ones that I know that I definitely enjoy. So I'll grow again. Let me know if you guys want to see any more content like this where we talk about varieties in further detail. I'm happy to go even in more detail about my experiences and growing some of these. But I did want to do, like I said, kind of a post-mortem of the whole experience, the whole season. It's always good to stop and reflect on the things that worked, the things that didn't work, and see where we can make changes for a better year next year. So looking forward to next year. I mean, we're going to be starting our onion seeds here in less than 3 months. So that's really exciting. Garlic's going to be planted out, at the end of this month. And so the whole cycle starts over again. And that's what's really, really exciting and thrilling about gardening is
you think that everything's over, but really it's not. So all right, guys, thanks again for hanging out with me as I kind of debrief on the summer 2025. I hope everybody has had a successful garden season. Let me know if you have any varieties that are your absolute favorite that you just grow year after year, and if they're varieties that I should check out. I'm always looking to hear from other gardeners what they enjoy growing and what they've had really good success with. So leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.